What's up, y'all? It's your girl, Nicole Lynn Gray. To be clear, hashtag the gray area. And it is the final day of the inaugural week of my podcast. So that means it's Friday. It's time. Look, if you're anything like me, Fridays is one of those days where just about anybody can get it. Boss has been nagging all week, kids running amok, the traffic, Lord, the traffic. So from now on, Fridays, I've resolved I'm not going back and forth with nobody. And if they don't like it, they can fight me. Any of y'all ever felt like that? Hell, that's me every Friday. So, we may as well get to the business. It's Fight Me Friday. The government ain't paying nobody no damn reparations. And if it did, I wouldn't want none of them. Yeah, I said it. Now what you gonna do? Fight me? Bring it on. Sure, it would be nice if the government recompensed black folks for the atrocities of slavery. But looking at how old the promise is, it's likely never gonna happen. Shoot, with the way our government works right now, if a law was passed to pay reparations, I bet people wouldn't see a dime of the money. That's even assuming that such a bill would even make it through the hyperpartisan gauntlet that we call our federal government. So, really, although reparations are a nice pie in the sky, don't offer me no more here. I'm full. Now, many of you are familiar with the expression 40 acres and a mule. So I don't think anyone is lost with the significance of the promise. But I think now that the promise has come up in 2019 presidential debates, I think it's a nice time for us to visit what promise was made, who it was made by, and what's taking so damn long fulfilling it. That's really what this podcast is about. First, where'd the 40 acres and a mule come from in the first place? Well, the 40 acres comes from Special Field Order Number 15, issued by Union General William Tecumseh Sherman after it was approved by President Lincoln. The date of the order, January 16th, 1865. The order reads in relevant parts: the islands from Charleston south, the abandoned rice fields along the rivers for 30 miles back from the sea, and the country bordering the St. Johns River, Florida, are reserved and set apart for the settlement of the Negroes, now made free by the acts of war and the proclamation of the President of the United States. Another relevant section reads, on the islands and in the settlements hereafter to be established, No white person whatever, unless military officers and soldiers detailed for duty, will be permitted to reside, and the sole and exclusive management of affairs will be left to the freed people themselves. By the laws of war and the orders of the President of the United States, the Negro is free and must be dealt with as such. And now to the 40 acres part. It reads, each family shall have a plot of not more than 40 acres of tillable ground, and when it borders on some water channel with not more than 800 feet waterfront, in the possession of which land the military authorities will afford them protection until such time as they can protect themselves, or until Congress shall regulate their title. And with the order, 400,000 acres of land, that described in the first section that I read to you, was redistributed to the newly freed slaves. Now wait, hands down, historians, I know some of you are thinking, if the land was redistributed, then why are we still talking about this 155-year-old promise in 2019? Now, this brings me to my next point rather nicely, because after the order was issued, freedmen wasted no time taking up the government on its promise. In fact, almost immediately, 1,000 blacks followed a Baptist minister named Ulysses L. Houston to Skidaway Island, Georgia, and they established a self-governing community with Houston as the black governor. And by June, 40,000 freedmen had been settled on the 400,000 acres, which was then known as Sherman Land. It was then after the freedmen were settled that Sherman later ordered the army to lend the new settlers mules. Now, that's where the 40 acres and a mule comes from. Now, I know some of you are wondering, they got the 40 acres and a mule? So what really are we talking about now? Well, as history would have it, Lincoln's successor, Andrew Johnson, was a sympathizer with the South. And as soon as he took office, he overturned the order in the fall of 1865. And with overturning the order, he returned the land to its original owners. Now, some of you may be wondering how the government makes such a bold promise, fulfills it, and then goes back on it, all in a matter of months. Well, here's how that happened. See, because although General Sherman led the Union to defeat the Confederates in the South, it wasn't General Sherman's idea to redistribute the land. It was actually the idea of 20 black men, all of whom were leaders and ministers in the black community of Savannah, Georgia. Now, it is true that abolitionists and other radical Republicans had been actively advocating land redistribution to break up the Southern slaveholders' power. But Special Field Order Number 15 was not issued until 4 days after General Sherman had his meeting with the 20 black ministers and leaders. The spokesman for the group was a man by the name of Garrison Frazier. At the time, Frazier was 67 years old and had been born into slavery in Granville, North Carolina. He was a slave until 1857, when he purchased his freedom along with that of his wife's for $1,000 in gold and silver. That was just 8 years before the order was issued. Reverend Frazier, as he was known, had been a minister for 35 years and spoke for the group when posed questions by General Sherman. General Sherman posed 12 questions to the group, one of which was, what does a Negro want most? You know what Reverend Frazier responded? Land. The reason why? He's quoted to have said, "The way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and to turn it and till it by our own labor, and we can soon maintain ourselves and have something to spare. We want to be placed on land until we are able to buy it and make it our own." Now, you may recall from one of the excerpts that I shared from the order that the land was to be occupied by the freedmen solely. No white men were to live on the redistributed land. That was also the idea of the 20 black leaders. And when asked whether the freedmen would rather live scattered among the whites or in colonies by themselves, Reverend Frazier responded, "I would prefer to live by ourselves, for there is a prejudice against us in the South that will take years to get over." Boy, was Reverend Frazier wise. It's the type of prejudice that was feared by Reverend Sherman and the 20 leaders that exists still today, that leads me to believe that this is a promise that'll never be fulfilled. The recent increase in racial tension has brought our federal government nearly to its knees. With our representatives these days representing hardcore racists in one hand and bleeding hearts in the other, there's hardly any place to meet in between. Even things that are beneficial to us all seem to stall out in our dysfunctional government. The dysfunction of our government is the main reason I don't want no more reparations pie. Because with all of the renewed talk of reparations, none of the presidential hopefuls have laid out a plan of how they plan to gain bipartisan support in our hyper-partisan world. So you see, I hate to see the promise made again and be relied upon just for it to be reneged. As you see, as quickly as the promise was fulfilled in 1865, it was reneged. And if you're like me, the only thing worse than an N-word is a re-N-word. And to be honest, our government is full of re-N-words. Take our president, for example. He may offer you a deal in the morning, and by the evening, it's off. And although our president may be the worst offender, our politicians are notorious for making promises that they either can't keep or that they hope that they could, and they get to the hill and find out that they can't. And I believe reparations is one of those types of promises. And even if the promise were fulfilled, I believe it would suffer the same fate as it did in 1865. Because the way that our federal government works right now, as soon as power would change hands, all bets would be off and the deal would go by the wayside. So, as I said in the intro, the federal government ain't paying no damn reparations. And if they did, I wouldn't want none. Y'all, this concludes the inaugural week of my podcast, and I cannot say enough how happy I am that you decided to join me here. I hope that you will join me again next week. We're taking another adventure of information and entertainment with Mondays to be clear, Tuesday come to find out, what's going on Wednesday, Thursday, and another Fight Me Friday. So if you enjoyed this week, please join me again next week and like, share, follow. I'm your girl, Nicole Lynn Gray, your infotainer. To keep up with everything that's going on with me, make sure to visit NicoleLynnGray.info. I'm out.